Okay, this is going to be my second in this series of things that I talk about involving Excel. This one we're going to focus on, let me type it out here so it's also shows up on the screen. Named ranges. And I'm going to get into macros a bit, and we're going to do some actual coding. I'm going to do this by hand. I'm not going to record a macro for this one. I'm going to do it by hand because there's a reason. Okay, anyway. All right, what's a named range? Let's start with that because it's a useful tool. I don't think I've never worked with anybody in Excel that knows what that is. Not that nobody knows, but none of the people I've worked with really know what it means. And so let's talk about that real quick. So you see how I'm in cell A1, and you notice that right here it says A1. So this will tell you what cell you're in, which is useful in a sense if you were like to say, you can go into your options here and you can kind of go down here and you can find this little option here that takes off the show row and column headers. You can remove that, and now suddenly you don't know what cell you're in unless you click on it. You can look right here. Who cares, right? I mean, that's not typically something that would really be on most people's radar, I don't think. So obviously it's one of these things. It's like, are you doing something to sound cool or whatever? Yeah, maybe. But if you're trying to use, like in my first video, we talked about how to get this formatting and why we do it this way. But we also talked about what I wanted to come on to next is one great use of a named range would be, say, the states, right? So you have a list of states, and if you're using any kind of address information in your forms for any kind of reason, then you're probably going to run into this, right? So one great way to do that is to have a text box where people can type it in. But Joni likes New Mexico, not the state. She likes typing it. I like to type everything out. Okay. Well, I don't want to see everything typed out, and this is my form. So then you have this thing going on. Or this guy likes to say, well, I used to live in Washington. Remember when they used to do random arbitrary number abbreviations for the state? So now everything has been very standardized into two characters for a state. And that's cool. That's all well and good, I think. I like it that way, but again, there's problems with everything you have. But if you think about what that is a lot of memorization. So one of the things that you can do is you can create a list of states. Now I don't know them right off the top of my head. Oh, there's my. But we're gonna do this. I'm gonna go state abbreviations. I'm just typing this into my URL field right here. Two-letter state, that's what we want, right? So here are all these things. Boom, right there, nice and laid out. I wish they were in one column. That's okay. So if this is what it is, okay, that's how it's going to be. That's fine. So sometimes you have to work a little bit. So I'm going to copy all of these, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to call this, for lack of a better idea today, I'm not creative as it seems, I'm going to call it named ranges. And so here I'm going to grab all of this stuff because I'm just dumping it in here for right now. So I'm going to take these out of here and I'm going to put that there. And I'm going to basically what I'm going to do is make these into one column because that's what we want. We want these into columns. I don't think I need North Mariana Islands. What the hell is that? Excuse my language. I'm going to no, I don't need that. Okay, so let's get rid of the weird ones. So get that, copy that, come down here, paste it, boom, sound effects. And, all right, Wyoming. I like how the abbreviation of Wyoming is WY, as in, why would anybody choose to live in Wyoming? Just kidding. All right, so I get rid of the border. All right, now that I don't need any of this stuff, okay, I'm going to clear. This is an awesome feature. Clear all. Boom, back to normal. Okay, and this one is taking away all the stuff. So I'm just going to clear formats. Clearing formats will remove anything weird that's gone on, but not the content. Okay, now here's a useful thing that you may or may not be aware of. Where did it go? Seems like my screen might. Oh, here we go. 56. Got it. So you see this count feature right here? I have selected 56 cells. Now, I am no genius, especially when it comes to geography. In fact, at trivia, geography is probably among my weakest subjects. But I do know that there's not 56 states in the United States. I also know that GU doesn't exist. So I got to get rid of these weird ones, right? I could go back to putting all those back on the screen, but I'm gonna go by memory because this is just a tutorial. GU shouldn't be there. If I right click in there and I delete that, it gives me a chance to shift the cells up or whatever. I didn't take it. I thought I did. Let's do that again. Delete, shift cells left, right. That way you don't have a gap. So you shift cells up in that case. So I got rid of that. So now there's 55. I need to clear out. I think we have 50 states in America, if I'm not mistaken. So I guess we're looking for 5 more weird ones. All right. And so PR is Puerto Rico. Not that I have anything against Puerto Rico, but they are not in this example. It's just 50 states I'm looking for. I could probably leave it like this, to be honest. I probably don't even need to change any of that. I know VI doesn't matter. Never heard of that either. Shift cells up. Okay, let's not spend a ton of time on here. I now have a pretty good list of states, 53 states, I guess. I'm gonna Control X that because I don't really want to leave those there. I'm gonna come over here to this column here. I'm gonna start in 2. Show you why in a minute. All right. So I know that this is my named range sheet. The idea of having that is that I can come to this sheet when I'm looking for any named range that I have. And the named range is often used. The best use of a name range, to be straight up, is a drop down list. It's the best use. You don't want to use one for like a checkbox, and it's not that useful in general if you just have a few. Like if you have 3 drop down items, let's say apples, oranges, grapes, you can just throw those right into a data formula into a drop down if you like. But a named range is very nice because what I can do is I can call this state abbreviation, right? And I can abbreviate that myself because why not? So I have my state abbreviations. That's going to be my heading. So all of my named range headings, I'm going to put all my named ranges on this sheet. And each named range is going to have a specific use. And each named range is going to have a name so that I know when I come over here if I want to add. This is important too because let's say I decided I want to add Puerto Rico back to a name range. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute, but I want to be able to come in here and edit it when I need to. Because if I don't, what's the point of having something like this? The point of having something like this is that I can just tell Excel to use the named range, and I don't have to tell it which cells to look for. I don't have to tell it what values I want. I just have to do the named range. If I can remember one thing called a named range, then I'm good. I'm gold. And I can move that named range everywhere I want. I don't need to keep it in one place. And if you're using named ranges, when I get to that point, I'll show you what I mean by this, but you should use some sort of convention when naming these ranges. And that convention should be carried out through all of your named ranges because then it's easier to kind of remember how you named something. So in the case of like state abbreviations, my named range might be abbreviations state or something, and I'll show you what I mean. And that way I know when I'm going to get something for a named range, I know what my named range should be. So to make a named range, that's the next thing we got to do. So we have our our states in 2-letter abbreviation. Come down here and I'm going to start at the first one and then I'm going to Control Shift and the down arrow key will go all the way down and highlight every last one. That particular Control Shift down will highlight every value up until it reaches a point where there's no values. And I could see a couple of values in here that are nothing. But anyway, doesn't matter. Now, here's the beauty. So a named range is I'm going to give this whole entire block that I've copied a name, so that if I refer to that name, Excel knows that every single one of these values exists in that name. It's a list. It's like a grocery list. And on that grocery list, in this case, is abbreviations. So I will go up here into this section. You'll see that it's highlighted A2 because that's the first cell that I've highlighted. I type in the equal sign. That's the first part of making a name range. If you don't do this, it won't work. And then I'm going to call this one, just like I said, I'm going to call it state abbreviations. And I'm going to do it just like that. This convention is what you would call camel case in the programming sphere. This here is lowercase, first letter, and then every new word that you put into this will have a capitalization. So if, let's say I wanted this to actually be state abbreviation two letters, right? Then I would call this as short as possible with as much meaning as possible. I don't want to look at this name later and go, what the heck is that? I want to know what this named range refers to. So I want to be descriptive with my name, but I don't want to spell it out and have 1,000 characters in my named range. So I'm going to do the most logical thing would be to create a shortest version possible of something that when I read it by itself, it makes sense and I know exactly what I'm referring to. So I have state abbreviation. I want 2 characters. I'll go 2 character. And this way, it's as short as I can possibly make it to where I know this is my state abbreviation list that uses 2 characters for the state abbreviation. That's how you do camel case. But in this case, I'm not going to have another state abbreviation scenario or configuration. It's going to be the 2 characters. It's always going to be this list. So I don't have to care much beyond that. I'm just going to make this so that I understand when I see state abbreviation as a named range, I know exactly what that means. So then I hit enter. Oh boy. Did I just own myself? Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to retract that. I thought the equal sign is for a formula. I was lost in formula town. And instead of re-recording this video, I'm just going to correct myself right here. Uh, you don't need the equal sign. You just type in the name. The name, everything else I said was exactly correct. So now as you'll see, I can put my cursor in here. This doesn't tell me anything. But if I highlight that specific set of cells, now it's called state abbreviation. So that's a named range. It's exactly what the name of it seems to indicate. This range of cells has a name. That's what it is. So now, how would I even go about using that? Cool, now I know what it is. Now imagine if I were to make a drop down. Let's go back to this main section. Let's say, take this here, for example. Under the data tab, there is boy, this thing seems like I've never been in Excel before. So there's this thing over here called data validation. I don't know what it looks like on yours. It depends on your version. In this case, you'll see like a little no sign and a checkbox, a couple things. But if you just hover over it, it'll tell you what they are. In this case, it's going to be data validation. And you can use this for dropdown. Now we have circle invalid data, clear validation circles, and data validation. To be honest, I've never used circle invalid data, but I'm sure I could figure it out. For now, we're going to use this data validation. Excel calls it data validation. Everyone else in the world calls it a drop-down menu. And so this says allow any value, okay? You may or may not want to allow any value, but in this case, we're going to go ahead and choose a list because we're going to create a list, right? We want to do an in cell dropdown right here. This is going to make your cell a dropdown. If you don't do this, it won't work right. So that's going to be an in cell dropdown, and this is going to be ignore blank. So if it's blank, it's fine. Okay. Must source. Okay, we're going to get to the source next. Source. Aha. Guess what this is? This is where you put the equal sign. That's why I remembered it that way. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to type in that named range I just created. When cell is selected, show this input message. Error alert. Okay, so this will show an error alert if invalid data is entered. And that's important because you don't want to let anybody enter values in here. The only values that will let in here if you keep this checked is the ones selected from the dropdown. So again, that's list. You put your named range in there. Can also be done by clicking this button right here. If you don't use a named range, or even if you do, it doesn't matter. If you click this button and then go to this named range and select it anyway, like this, and choose this range and hit enter. Now it's got a named range, so it will put it in there. But if you were to select this value, then it would choose that named range value. So we'll just go ahead and just type in the named range. But this is why you use a named range that you can remember, because when you enter it in there, you don't have to come back and think about what you named it. Boom. Now we've got a drop down that has all of those states in it. All right. And the only value it will allow is a blank value. I type in something that doesn't exist, it don't like it, but blank is okay. So you can delete it, or you can select one of those values, but you cannot put whatever you want in there. Perfect. Now, let's say you, oh man, I know that I have a named range. I can't remember what it is. Do not panic. Grab a coffee. Relax. Up here under formulas. Now, I know this isn't going to necessarily be exactly intuitive. That's fine. Under formulas, you're going to find this little thing called name manager. This box, or this button rather, when you push it, will bring up all of your named ranges. And if you want to know what those are, you can click it and it will tell you that it's on the named range sheet, which I need to change because it should be ranges. And these are the values on that sheet that it refers to. The dollar sign in there, if you've never seen that before, that refers to an absolute reference. It's not really necessary in this case because you're not going to be shifting and moving, but use an absolute reference like the dollar sign in front of the row or the cell. And when you do that, what you're basically doing is telling Excel that you always want to reference that value. It's hard to explain without showing you, and I don't want to go into the weeds on this, but if you create a range of values like that, like this state abbreviations, and then you tell Excel to use that range for the cell that you're in, let's say, and then you copy that formula down, what Excel will try to do is it will try to use relative values. And so if you have a list from A1 to A5 on another sheet, and you're in a cell and you put a formula saying that you want to reference A1 to A5 on that other sheet for some reason, if you copy that formula down without an absolute reference, the next one down will have the range A2 to A6. The one down below that will go to A3 to A7. It will increment the starting value and every value from there, because that's what a relative reference does. It starts at a specific cell in relation to the one you're in. And when you go down one to copy it, then you'll be referencing the cell on your named range that you had that's the second cell, because it's relative to the second position in your current list, etc. So the absolute reference, though, with this dollar sign, is you could reference the A1 through A5 on another sheet, copy that down the sheet that you're on, and it will never change those values. It'll stay A1 to A5. So that's why the dollar sign is in there. Just make sure that Excel does not increment the row and column if you have to copy that cell. So that's why it's there. It's not necessary in this case because you won't be doing that with any other with a value. But if you ever have to do a formula that references a range and you want to copy that down, you'll want to use, or to the left or right, you'll want to use these absolutes. And the dollar sign goes in front of the row and the column. So if you're going to copy it left or right, you want that dollar sign to be in front of the letter. If it's going to be up and down, you want it to be in front of the number. Okay, that was a side quest completed. This is a named range. So I'm going to cancel that. I just want to point something out. We were talking about adding a name to a named range. Let me do something here real quick because that's the incorrect name. I right clicked on it, I changed the name. Check this out. The beauty of something like that, if I go back into my name range, look, it changed it for me. So that's cool. And I don't have to go and change my name range or any of that. Took care of it for me. Uh, the named range, though, it's really only going to refer, it doesn't refer to itself as the sheet and named range. It's just the named range, right? So that this could be on any sheet, doesn't matter. The named range here just tells it what sheet it's on. And this just basically records, hey, this is my named range. It's right here. This particular name points to this particular set of cells on this sheet. That's what that's for. Cool. Named range. Okay, that's named ranges. That's everything about those for that part of it. Here's a TT state, which I don't know, Texas territories. I don't know. So I don't want it in here. I can then go in here, right click that and delete it, shift my cells up. Now, here's go time. You can see that because I did it that way, I still have my named range. If, however, I just go in there and start deleting stuff, it gets a little tricky. It's still a named range, but now you've got this gap in there, and if you try to pull this up, you're going to see weird gap right there. So, what do we do about that? Anytime you delete a name from a named range, any value, you want to do the shift up. And you can go into a blank cell and do that. Shift up. Okay. That'll get rid of the blank one. And then, of course, you want to keep your stuff in there. Control Z will go back to it. But let's say, oh, you know what? I do want TT in there. So I want to go in here. So what you're going to do is you're going to, if you're going to add to a named range, you cannot add it to the end without extra work. But we can do that. So let's say we add on Zaire as a new state. Okay, check this out. The named range does not include Zaire, right? So if I go back to the main sheet, Zaire's not in there. Okay. All right, now I have two options. One of the things that I can do is I can add to the inside of a named range and drag. So, okay, insert, shift cells. I want this to go, I'll say down, it's fine. Okay, all right. And now maybe I can like, okay. So now I have that in there. Let me get rid of it. Delete, shift cells up. Start over. And I don't have any Zaire in my name range. So you can't do that. So what you got to do is adding a new one requires that you go to the name manager. So you click on that, you go to formulas. It's not that big of a deal. I noticed that the last cell in my name range is now 54, so I'll just change it right there. Oops. Change it. 5. My number locks wasn't on. Change it to 5-4. Yes, I want that, and that will change and update everything on all the workbooks inside of this thing, so it's kind of hands-free that way. And now my name range is back, and if I go to my main sheet, I should have Zaire in there. The other way to do that, oops, I keep going back to that. The other way to do that is if I just want to add something between New Hampshire and New Jersey, I'll go into New Jersey. I want it above New Jersey, so I'll insert and I'll shift the cells down, and I'll say this is going to be New New India, I guess, New Indiana. Okay, now watch this. I inserted that into the middle of my named range by inserting it and shifting all the cells. Notice how now my named range, without any extra work at all, includes New India. Okay, New Indiana. Sorry. So that's how you'd work with a named range as far as lists go. I keep hitting Alt Tab, which sends me back to that other browser. Uh, So I've added a value and it automatically updates. So that's how you can add a value, is that you insert it in there and delete it. But if it has to be at the beginning of the list, or actually, check this out. I think if I was wanting to add something to the end of the list, I could go like this. Right click the last cell, insert, shift cells up, shift cells right, shift cells down, entire row, entire column. So let's see, entire row. That didn't work. Oh, shift cells down. Okay, so it turns out it's been a while, but you have to add that in like that and insert or add it and then change your name range under your formulas name range manager and update it there. Okay, now that's just basically setting name ranges. Cool, I have drop down. That's great. What else can I use name ranges for? There are a variety of reasons. One of the things when you're developing a tool in software is a concept called DRY, dry. Don't repeat yourself. The idea is you want to make code that you're not typing that same code somewhere else later, right? So if I'm in a situation where I have a group of objects and I would use the fruit example, or let's say I'll use a favorite color example. Favorite color. I did this on the previous video. So I come over here and my favorite colors are red, blue, green, purple, and chartreuse, because that's a funny word. I don't even know how to spell it actually. Chartreuse? Anyway. It's a green color. It's actually used on power bait quite a bit. I used to fish. Okay. So I want to go ahead and make my check boxes. So go back to my formulas. I'm just going to set my border to outside. And then I'm going to color it white. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this painter. And any cell I click into from there will have a border of black and will be white. Can also drag it, but I'm not doing that. Okay, and that's a double click. If you only single click it, then you'll only be able to highlight one cell before that functionality goes. So that's how you use that little painter feature. Uh, Double click for multiple, single click for one. Escape will deselect. Now, ordinarily, I would typically put a little bit of space in here by formatting my. I'm gonna bring back my tabs here real quick. Hold on. Options, advanced, right about right there. Show tab. Okay. Okay. So ordinarily, I might make these rows like this tall so that I can add just a tiny bit of space in there to separate each of these. I don't care that much here though. But back into formatting, I'm going to go wingdings 2 so that a capital P. I think you're going to find out why I'm doing it this way in a minute, I hope. But the idea is that wingdings font will allow you to use capital P as a check mark, which is fun because it makes it look more like what you would expect to see as a check mark. Okay. I think you can have multiple favorite colors. That's true. It's not like I'm limiting myself. If I want to have a favorite color of white, I can also say my equally favorite color is green. But there might be a situation where you're asking for this sort of information and you want atomic values. You don't want to allow several. You only want one favorite color because you're going to go out and you're going to do a theme for somebody's birthday party. So you like to collect this information so that later on you can pull it and go, oh, Steve likes pink. So we're going to go out and make this pink Barbie style party. And everything's going to be centered around the color pink. So you only want that one value. Now you might want two because maybe, pink and green could be a fact, could be something. I don't know. But we're just going to pretend like Steve can only have one favorite color. So how would we set this up? A couple different ways. I could go over here to my developer tab and I could go in here and I could grab a checkbox and I could set that checkbox here, and then I could do another one. I could Control C, Control V, and each of these things, I have four, okay, I have 5 colors, right? So each of these things can have a checkbox, and they can be, and then you can tell that there's kind of like some lettering there or something like that. So anyway, I'm having a little bit of fun trying to set these in just the right spot, but it's not working, and it looks like I have, okay, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm trying to do 5 colors, so I got 5 checkboxes. They don't line up because apparently uh, the cells and the checkboxes are not the same size. Cool. I think you can resize them, but it becomes kind of a hassle. So I'm going to set these out here, and I'm going to set this aside over here as a way to show another way of doing this. So favorite color. And nope, I don't want this just yet. So I just want to come in here and double click, I guess. Right click on it and then edit the text. Order format, view code properties, checkbox objects, edit. Okay. And then we're going to go red. You can already see what a hassle this is, but anyway, that's fine. And then we're going to say blue because that's what we said before. And then we're going to go with, believe it or not, green. Ooh, tricky. And of course, I'm just pretty much mimicking what I did over here. And I'm also doing this to kind of illustrate what a pain in the caboose this can be. Never mind the dog, he's doing his thing. All right, cool. So I've got this favorite color, and I should have made these radio buttons. But now I've got tools in here that I can use, so I can check these just like I can over here. All right. You can essentially do what I'm about to do with these guys using this, but when we double clicked in there earlier, you saw, if you were paying attention, this box come up, and the checkbox 1 is the name of the checkbox, and click is the function that it has assigned to it. That's a built-in function for this element, and they all have that same click function, which basically is just an event that occurs on the page. But some of the things that you can do, watch. This is my checkbox, right? So I want it to have some sort of meaningful value. So we're going to call this, I'm going to call it check, and I'm going to call it red, just like that. Check CHK underscore red. And I want you to, I'm pointing that out because it's going to play into something when I use these other boxes. But this is what I call it. And now I've set the property to have that as checkbox red. Now I have check red click. So I know that that checkbox was once red one. So now this is what I'm dealing with. It's private because it will only work on this sheet. And it's a sub because it's subroutine, and then end sub is where, so inside of these two designations is where your whole entire functionality will be. Okay, so in something like this, you can do something like if check red dot checked, I think is what it is. It checked. So, what is it? Checked dot value equals checked, I think. Ah, yes. Then forgot about the then. I'm just doing this as kind of like an example of what can be done. Then check blue dot value, and I better spell that correctly. Equals. Okay, I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've done this, so I'm not sure. Can't remember. I'd have to look it up. But take this out of design mode, close that down, and all right. So I'm gonna uncheck that. Oh, I think I remember now. It might be more like this. If well, no, I thought it was. Okay. Oh, nope. I remember now what my problem is. I am too impatient. So we gotta set the property of that one to check underscore blue. Okay, cool. All right, close the properties. Get rid of design mode. Go into design mode. All right. I thought it was so if red. Check red. Oh, that's because I spelled this wrong. First of all, maybe. So you're watching me try to remember how these codes work because it's been a while. So that's checked. That's going to be okay. So, and that essentially what we're saying is if this is checked already and I hit that one, it should undo the blue one, but it isn't doing it. It did it that time. I think it's because I have forgotten how the checkboxes work. Click if check value, if check dot. Okay, I'll figure it out, and you'll figure it out right here with me. Let's see if it likes that code or not. So far, no errors. Okay. Doesn't support this property. And you hit debug, it'll take you to it. Okay. So let's do value. Checked is true. Unchecked should be false. That's also possible. There it works. Okay. So I have blue checked and I click red and it unchecks the blue value. Okay. So that right there is where I'm trying to make these exclusive, right? So then I could go back in, I can go to design mode. I can go back in here and I can do this with every single. I haven't changed the names, but this is essentially what it would look like. And then when I would have, then I could do the same thing down here. I could write private sub, check red, check blue. And this one would be click same code, right? But what I would be doing is I'd be copying and pasting it. And if you could tell right now, I'm sort of repeating myself, right? So I would then change this to red, check red. So now this code tells me if I've checked the blue value, which I have to set here too. So if I've checked, if blue is clicked and the value is true, then red and green are going to be unchecked. That's what this code says. This code here says the same thing, but if red is clicked and the red value is checked as true, then the other two are going to be false. So this code is essentially exactly the same as this code. The only difference is this naming convention right here and here. Cool. So this is now what we have as repeating ourselves. Now we could, of course, leave these as change these into radio buttons, which it does the same exact little feature there. But the problem that you run into, at least I run into, is that you've got these these weird formatting things with these form controls. So if I want to change that to the same color, I have to play with it until I figure out, you know, hold on. I had me one of them their coffin fits. Had to pause it. All right. I was talking about, not that. Formatting these because I want that to match the background. You can do that or you can use the palette. But, um, oh, I did the four color. Whoops. So I want the four color. I can use the system or the palette. As you can see, my palette doesn't match the palette that I'm using on the Excel worksheet itself. So I've always wondered why. How is it that I can change the color of this background to whatever it gives me But then I want this to match so it blends in, and I just can't get it right. Try that. Still not the same. See, so this is why I don't use these. Because it's a formatting nightmare, right? I want this thing to look like a machine, not a painting. I don't want it to look like something that my kid threw together. No slam on my kid. I'm just saying this isn't what I want. It doesn't work for the aesthetic of this company. So, what are my options? Radio buttons. I can do that too. A group of radio buttons. By the way, I think you can make this transparent actually. So, if I'm not mistaken, that might be the way to go. But it seems like right off the top of my head, I don't remember how that works. But anyway, it's a nightmare, right? But if I take options, option buttons they're called, these things work exactly like we were just discussing. Whereas if I click this button and that button, it will uncheck the other button. Yeah, it works great. And when I first started working with this stuff, I thought that's a great idea. And the code works just the same way. I mean, you come in here, you click on it, you use the same code, works fine. You can just copy and paste that stuff right over. But again, we have formatting issues, right? But right here, I've got awesome formatting control. It all blends right in to the rest of this sheet that I'm doing right now. I've got what you would call a theme going on. I'm gonna mess that up. Man, I'm doing good with this stuff, right? So what do? Well, here's what I do. I make these into mutually exclusive checkboxes by using named ranges, which was the whole point of the start of this thing, right? Okay, so to do the named range, I'm going to give each of these a name. I'm thinking about not wanting to repeat myself in the code as we were looking at here just a minute ago, right over here. I don't want to repeat myself over and over. I want to write one piece of code that does all this for me without. We're going to get advanced here, so it gets advanced real quick. But I'm going to show you how I'm trying to think and help you through the logic of what I'm doing so that you can do this sort of thing. And you can do this if you want to create. This is a button that I created. So I want you to think about how this will apply to that, because it will. But I'm going to go, okay, I want anything that I make on here, right? I want it to have some sort of functionality, but I want it to have similar functionality to other things. And so to do that, one of the ways I could do that is I could give these each their own unique name, and I could write code just like I did for those check boxes earlier, where if I check one, then I can insert the value into, in this case, it'd be capital P, like I was showing you before, right there, because it's Wingdings 2 font. I can put that capital P value in there, and I can then cause these to have no value and be unchecked, and so forth for each of these. But it would be requiring me to repeat myself, because I would have to say, if you click on this red button, uncheck blue, green, purple, chartreuse. If you click on the blue button, uncheck red, green, purple, chartreuse, etc., etc., etc. It gets old. It's not what you want. So what I do is I'm going to call this a checkbox in my mind. That's a checkbox. I might also want to call it an option button, right? Because it's going to work depending on how I do this. It's going to be a check button that works like a radio button. And then over here, I'm going to have a check box. These are not mutually exclusive. If I check that one, I can still check that one. This one should not uncheck, and this one should not uncheck. But over here, if I check this one, all of the rest of these should become unchecked. If I check that one, this one, or any other ones that were checked should uncheck. That's what I'm going for right now. That's my thought process. So with that in mind, I'm going to give these guys a prefix. And I think In the past, I've used the chk underscore, and you can do that, but I'm gonna call it opt. I'm gonna call it what? Let me do it like this: check opt. That's gonna be my prefix because I'm gonna treat it like an option button. This one I'm gonna call red because that's what it is called. See, I'm highlighted there, red, using camel case. Whereas in this one, I might just call it check underscore updated. I don't need the underscore in there. I'll do it this way too for this one just because. Updated. Updated. Okay. And then over here will be check authorized. Okay. Cool. And so in the tradition there, I'm going to do this. Okay, so now each of these has their, oh, I say, oh, because another thing about name ranges, I was being careless. They have to be unique. That's the other thing. Put, you cannot have the same, like two opt check purples, for example, which I just did and wasn't even paying attention. Just going along on autopilot, started daydreaming. Okay, and this one I'm not going to type out chartreuse this time. I'm going to call it char. There we go. Yeah, cool. Now I have my name ranges, as you can see. Okay, and if we go back to formulas and we look at our name manager, we now see all the name ranges that we have created thus far. You can also see the value that they contain currently. It tells you which cell it is, and it tells you the scope of it, which means that this just says workbook. It's available to any function within the workbook. But anyway, that's not here or there. So I'm going to close that. All right, cool. Now, I need a function that is going to check the box that is in right here, right? Okay, I need a function that's going to do I need a function. Let me go over what I need. I need a function that will put a p-value in here, capital P, to create the checkbox. I need a function that will remove a value and here's my logic on this. I should also be able to check the button. It should work like this. If I check it, it goes unchecked if it's checked. If I click on it and it is not checked, it'll get checked. So it should work like that. As you click in it or click on it, depending on whatever the state of it is, it'll go to the opposite state of that. So if we're talking unchecked, it should be checked. If it's checked, it will be unchecked. That way, not only when I click on the red and it checks, and these also uncheck, I can uncheck that by clicking in it again, which is a feature of a radio button that doesn't happen. You can't have a radio button that if you click it, you can unclick it. It just doesn't work that way for some weird reason. So my functionality will be that that button will take the opposite state of whatever it is now when you click on it. I also want to separate out these other ones and make sure those get unchecked, right? And then I want to have a function that splits apart the named range because I said they were unique, right? But one thing to notice on these name ranges, and this will come into play why I name them this way. The first 6 characters, if I want to include the underscore, it can be 7. But the first 6 characters are CHKOPT. So when I go looking at the current cell, I can look at the named range and I can ask it to pull out the first 6 characters. And then with that in mind, if I have CHKOPT, I know that what I've clicked on is one of the exclusive checkboxes that I've created. Now, if I have another atomic value situation, what's your favorite day of the week? I can then call that CHKOPT underscore MON and then TUE. And I could show you this. I'll show you this at the end of the video, how that works. But essentially, all I'll be doing is I'll be writing code that looks for that particular combination of letters and then separates out the last portion of it. Actually, you know what? And while I'm doing this, I like this, and I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. If I come in here, I can edit these. Now, I don't have to do it this way, but it's going to be easier if I do. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the last part of this 3 characters. And the reason for that is that I can take the first 6 characters from the left of these and then the last 3 characters on the right. And that will allow me to know what I'm specifically dealing with. So as an example, if I extract the first 6 characters of the cell that I'm in, of the named range that it is, it'll give me the CHK OPT, or it'll give me nothing, or CHK, for example, for updated, or CHK, if I do the first 3 characters of updated CHK, then I will have CHK is the value I'll have in that. And with that, I know I can say, okay, if my value, when I click on this, if the named value starts with CHK, right, and that's the first 3 options, then I know that I have a checkbox. Then I'm going to look for the last 3 characters, and if that is blue, I know what to do with that. Or CHR, or GRN, or PUR, or ED. I know that I have a checkbox, and basically, I know that it's a checkbox that's also an option whose name is blue. So when I think about when I name these this way, I think about this first part is kind of like a mister, you know? So at a party you can have several misters, but then at the last part of it is the name. So Mr. Blue, Mr. Chartreuse, Mr. Green. Obviously they're all misters, so I know if I'm speaking directly to them, I can call them Mr. But the blue gives me a very unique person. So I now have Mr. Blue, and I don't have Mr. Green. I don't have Mr. Yellow. I don't have Mr. Whatever. I have Mr. Blue. So I know I'm dealing with Mr. Blue. I know I'm dealing with Mr. Green, but I know that I'm dealing with a Mr. And so, something like that, maybe if you're a tailor from the 1950s when genders weren't a thing or weren't more than 2. And I don't want to get into that because I'm an ally. I don't care about getting into it yet. But when that was the case, and you could definitely tell that a guy was a guy, you could say Mr. Blue or Miss So and so. And so this is just kind of a way to lump things together while also giving them a name. And that's important. And we're going to see why right now. Okay, cool. So I got my named range. I'm going to go into my Visual Basic window. We're going to be on this sheet here. Okay. And we're going to make a sub. I'm going to make this one public. I don't have to do that. I can just call it sub. We're going to call this set state. And all this is going to use an if statement. If active cell name, no, value equals capital P. So that's what we're looking for. I always forget that you don't use that in C++. If it's then, and I want to go active cell dot value equals nothing. I can do else if, can't remember if they separate here or not, we're going to find out. Active cell dot value equals nothing. Then active cell value equals P, right? All right, does it hate me? Seems to be okay. If I check on it, all right, it's not running because the simple fact of the matter, I don't have any change. I don't have any listening event. Okay, So let me go back in there to this guy, to Visual Basic. This isn't in a module. Let me put it in a module. Then it'll be available as a macro on the sheet. Okay. Don't save that. Go back to the sheet and then run the macro. Set state. All right. Okay, I forgot my end if. Forget about little things like that. In C++, that's actually just a parenthesis. But anyway, okay, go back. I think we got it. Macro. All right, set state. All right, so it checked it, and now if I run that macro again, it should uncheck it. And so what that macro has done, and it will work on any cell at this point, because it's only something that's going to work on the active cell, right? So if I go back to run that again, it's going to stop it. So that piece of code for this cell makes a check mark because Wingdings font 2, capital P, as it is right there. You see the value. And then again, when you go macro, set state, run. Okay, cool. So now we've got this macro that does what we want it to do. It'll do it with any cell. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply some type of logic so that it will make a decision. And so I want to pull this back into the sheet, though. I like it to be in here. It's already there. That's fine. Okay. So I can use that macro now. And I'm going to go sub. Let's do checkbox. Update. That's good. Checkbox select. All right. So in this one, the whole idea is that I better give this a better name. I want to give it a good naming convention. So I'm going to call this checkbox radio button. That's what I'm going to call it. Because it works like a radio button, which is one of those round ones, those option buttons that you can always select one. They're called that, interestingly enough, if you know, because back in the days when radios were push button, you would push that one button in and it would stay in, and then when you push the other button, it would pop the other one out and then the other one would stay in. So that behavior got brought over into computer programming, and that's why they call it radio buttons. Yeah. Anyway, so we want that functionality with our checkboxes in this case. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of things. First thing I want to do, this is really not intuitive, so I'm going to do it and tell you what we're doing. Okay. One of the weird things with Excel, they may have fixed this by now. I actually haven't tested it, but it used to be, at least, it might still be, that if you were to click on a value, so click on a cell, and you were trying to get the named value of that cell, and you did not apply your own named range, you just left it as A1 or whatever, then you would get an error if it was blank, if there was no value in it. So like if I were to come over here and click on this, and I'm asking Excel to tell me what the named range is there, which is actually this value. That's the named range. If I ask it to tell me what that is, but it's one of these cells that has none of that, it's just going to error on me. It won't give me AK10. It'll just say, I don't know. It'll error out. It'll actually cause the program to stop working. Let me see if I can illustrate that. So I want to create a variable. So I'm going to call it, I'm going to call it color. Dim, that's how you create it. You're going to create it as string. So this is going to be a string variable. It's going to be called color. This says I'm creating a variable. This is telling me what kind of variable it is. And I'm going to assign it as active cell dot name dot. You got to do it twice or it won't pick up the named range. And then if you want to, you can go, let's see, message box, I think it is. It's been a while. That might not work, but let's see. Let's test that at least. All right, hit stop. Always want to hit stop when you're dealing with that. So, oh, the other thing is you have to do. Oh, you know what? Don't call. Yes, we can. We can go like this. We can go. I gotta select this down here and go. worksheet. So select worksheet up here. These have a specific selection change. And I want to do, is it selection change or is it change? I'm going to do selection change. That's what we want. Okay. So in this case, I'm just going to tell it, I'm just going to call check box radio button. I don't have to do it that way. I could put all of this logic inside of here and it'll work, but in this case, I'm just going to call the function. So now that we're back here, yep, see there. Now, that's a function that's not defined. So is it, okay, I can't remember. I'm sorry, is it? If not, hit stop. If not, I'll look it up real quick. Okay, I forget. If you don't use this stuff every single day, it can get forgotten. All right, so we're going to go Excel VBA message box. It's good that we're doing this because then you can also, okay, there you go. I see it right there, message box. Okay, so come back in here and type in MSG. Remember when that was all demonized? MSG, that flavor, that color seasoning or whatever. All right, I should get, oh, look at that. So I guess they did, oh, no, this is cool. It works fine if you got the named range. See how that works? Now what happens when I click outside of that? So I get this error and application defined or object defined error because that cell I just clicked in doesn't actually have a dot name. What if I take that out of there? Hit stop anytime you have a bug or it won't work. It doesn't like it. Now what happens when I click into here? See? So when it's saying dot name, what it's actually trying to say is give me the actual cell reference and then tell me what the name that was given to that was. So we got to go dot name. But as you can see, that particular code creates an error. Now watch what happens when we do this stupid little piece of code. And that's okay. This is what you call an exception. When something happens it's not supposed to, that you don't expect. And why would you think that it's a problem? Why wouldn't Excel just kind of fail gracefully and go, oh, well, it wasn't given a name, so it wasn't meant to have a name? But computers don't make intuitive decisions like that. They just go, well, it doesn't have a name, and I'm expecting a name. You didn't give me a name, so you can fix it. So, on error, resume next. Okay, coughing fit. All right, so now the message box pops up, and it fails gracefully, which is also clear that if I don't use this message box feature, and instead I just go, if, here's a cool feature, left is a function, active, so well, I'm going to use the word color. I'm using my variable because what's going to pop up would be that OC, CHK, OPT, underscore red, right? So I just want to check, I just want to get the first three in this case. So I'm looking for the value or the cell or the thing I'm in, and then how many. So left 3 characters equals, and then this is what I'm looking for. And then I want message. I'm just gonna use message box. It's a good way to debug if you use these things. So then you go, let's go back and let's go color name. No, let's go cell type. There we go. And let's make that, let's do that instead. Left color 3, right? Okay, and then in there, I'm just gonna go if cell type equals check, message box, cell type. So if this works the way I want it to, we should see a message box come up with the letter CHK in it. There you go. Likewise, cell name. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I forgot to do this. It's apparently it will take it without it, but it's good practice, best practice to do some camel case here real quick. Okay, it automatically fixed it for me. That's awesome. Okay, and we're going to do that as string as well, and then dim cell name as string. So I want to do the cell name as the right three values, and I want the cell type to be the left three. So cell name equals right, and you guessed it, we're going to take that color and the three characters. So we should be able to, let's see, if I'm not mistaken, it's an ampersand that does concatenation. If I am mistaken, this won't work. Okay. All right. And there you go. Yes, it doesn't like it. So, oh, because I have some stuff in there. It shouldn't be there. Very picky, this VBA thing, as is any programming language, to be honest. So I got check green, check blue. Okay, so now I know this is working. I can test it further if I just want to go like this. This will slam the two together. I keep hitting Control Save, don't do that. Stop, and then cram them together. So now you see check blue. That's what we want. It's not what we want. If we wanted to, we could get the check opt part in there too. But right now what I'm doing is I'm showing you that I'm able to get partial value of the names, and it's important because if I do, once I do that, now I can say instead of doing that, what I will do is I will call that set state function, and then what we should end up with is anytime we click a cell, that if in there, and if. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Oh, because I did it in the other one, not this one. So now anytime I click a cell, all right, hit stop, where the first three letters are CHK, it's going to change the state of it, just like we showed you before. All right. And now we have this other little caveat. Watch this. I click in there, and then I click it again. See how nothing happens? Because it's already set. So the next thing that you have to do in this particular thing, when all of that is over, is you go active. So you're going to click range. I'm going to send this all the way up to A1.select. And at the end of that particular scenario, every time you click on this, the cell will end up over here, the cursor will end up over here, which doesn't nothing to your function, nothing at all. It does nothing other than it removes that so that I can click that willy-nilly and just keep changing the state over and over without having to click out of the cell and so on. So now I've created a checkbox that works exactly like a checkbox in just that little bit of code. And I've only done one piece of code. I haven't repeated anything yet. This one hasn't been named, so once I name it check authorized, as soon as I do that, it'll work. And that's part of why I was saying once you have that code in there, any box now, if I want to add, if I want to call this one check mate for fun, anytime I click in that box now, it's going to do the set state. Which means now in the future, when I want to add something, if I want to add mutually exclusive boxes, I might have to present some other kind of code as far as the name part of it goes, because I don't necessarily want this checkbox to affect this one. Like maybe my favorite color is red and my favorite cake is chocolate. I don't want to click chocolate over here and then have chocolate undo red. I don't want that. So I want my code to actively and selectively seek out the correct functionality, right? I want to click red, I want blue, green, purple, and chartreuse to uncheck. All right, how do we do that? All right, this is where we're going to get into thinking mode. I now have the set state perfect, right? So the only thing I need to know is if I click this one, are there any other values there that are also checked? And if they are, I don't want them checked. I want you to remove those checks. So now we have to go through and make sure that for each of those values, it's unchecked when you click on the red. Traditionally, what I would do is I would create a function that would undo the values that are not there. And then I would recreate that same code and repeat myself to undo the other values based on which one you clicked. So I'm gonna think. I need a situation where the logic says if this cell is blue and it's checked, then I need to see that if the same prefix with the name red, green, purple, or anything that isn't blue is unchecked. So what I can do then is in my set state, I definitely have p-value. I could then potentially, I want this to say check opt. That's what I want for this particular code. So I'm going to call the set state, and I'm going to pass into it cell name. And up here, we're going to get cell name. We're going to go by val target as, is it range? I don't think that's what I want. Target string, is that fine? I don't know. I actually don't do this very often. I might even be able to just go I think I can just pass in the value as a parameter. Okay, cell name. Let's try it. Okay, maybe I go cell name as string. How's that? Can that work? I might have to do target as string. I might have to just take this out. I'm going to default to nothing. I'm going to go cell name. All right, so I'm going to go if cell name. I want to get the value of the other ones. So let's see. Let me think about this for a second. I'm going to try something new that I've never tried here. That's why. All right, so it took a few minutes, but I decided I'm going to really make this simple as far as code goes. So I thought, why not loop through the range and figure it out from there? So I have, oops, so I now, come on. So now what I've done, this in design mode so it doesn't work right, is I've taken this range and I've given it its own. You can make a named range that includes other named ranges. This one encompasses these 5, could be any, but in this case, my named range is color options because that's a great way to call these ones because they are color options. So I thought, so here's what's happening right now. You click on it, you click in the cell, and it is going to check the values around it and uncheck them if they exist. How it does that, if we look back at the code, this may be, the code will be here. It won't be here if I don't find it. It'll be here in the video, and you can pause it at this section to read all that it works so far. This doesn't make the box check or uncheck depending on the state of it, but I'm going to fix that here in a moment. But right now what we're doing is when the thing is clicked, there's a change of change selection. So this worksheet selection change is a listener that Excel uses to determine if you've changed the cell with the cursor. So if the, or it could work with the arrow keys also. But if you're in A1 and you move to B2, that's a selection change. That's going to trigger the event inside here, which in this case is to call the check radio button. So what that's going to do is it's going to create some variables to hold values and then resume or keep the error from causing a problem. Now we're going to assign those variables that we created up here with values. In this case, the color is going to be the active cell name, which means you're clicking on, whatever you click on, if it has a named range on it for that cell, and it's a very specific named range, then it will assign that range to this color. It'll actually assign it as a string value instead of the range itself. So that means what that really means is if it's a range, Excel expects it to be a cell location. If it's a string, then it doesn't really, even if it says A1, to Excel it's just A and 1 together. It wouldn't use that unless you then put it into something that looks like this where you're using range and then whatever the name of it is. But it doesn't consider it a cell at that point. It just takes the value and puts it into a string. A string is a series of characters like a word or ABC 1, 2, 3. That's a string of characters. And a string should be considered just text that you can read. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't apply to anything special other than it's just text that you can read. And then I'm gathering just the left six ones, and that'll indicate that I'm choosing a check option button. And then I'm grabbing the right three, which if you name it that way, the right three will be the name. If you don't do it that way and you want to actually make the name the variable length, then you would write, instead of this value here, you would do something, and I don't know what the exact substring function in this case is. If it were JavaScript, you would choose a JavaScript substring function starting at a character in there, and if you know that you have that underscore at character 6, you start at 6 and go to the end of that particular string to get the name. But in my case, I made every last part of that string 3 characters. This is why I did it, to make it easier on myself, so that I know that I'm always collecting the last 3 characters to the right. The last 3 characters is what this will collect. So now I've got my color, which is essentially the name of the cell. I could probably call that color option, might be a good way to go, but for now it's color. Cell type is telling me, okay, this is the check option type, CHK OPT, and then this one is the cell name, which essentially is blue, green, red, etc. And so now I'm saying if this value is equal to this thing I expect it to be, then I want you to run a function, and this function is called uncheck colors. That's a misnomer in a way, but that's what I called it. And then I'm passing the cell name to it. That's what this does. So this is going to say call uncheck colors, and I clicked on red, so pass red. So the cell name being the last 3 will pass red to this function, which will grab it. So then how it works is I create a variable that will act as a range, and then I give that range a name called colors. Color options is the named range I gave it. So what this is going to do is take the color options range, give it a name of colors, and then this for loop, this is a loop, so this will do something for each value in that list. So that means if this colors list grows, this code does not have to be changed, because it'll just take all of the values in this named range from 0 to 100, or I guess more than that, 1 to 100 probably, and it'll put it into this variable called colors, which can then be referenced as a range. You would reference a range like A1 colon A4, for example. But in this case, colors refers to this, whatever's in this named range like we talked about. And when you say for each C in range colors, what you're basically saying is for every list item in that named range, I'm just going to shorten it to C. So in my case, it's color, right? So I could say color, but C was. And when you use a for each loop, you really are trying to create the shortest code you can. So it's very common practice, and probably even best practice, just to use the first character of the type of data that's in this range. So in our case, it's colors. So I'm saying for each C in range colors, C being the color for that particular instance. So in red and blue, so this here will say for each C in that range, I want you to see if the right 3 values of that particular value that I'm on is the cell name. So if I pass red to this, if the first thing it comes to is red, then this is going to remain. This is going to go false, and so then it'll skip to this section here. This is the else means that this part it came back false. So it'll skip that second value, and it'll do this instead. If I had several values to test, I could use an else if for each one. The last one of the thing is if everything else fails, then it'll go to the else. You can also just write another if statement right after it, because if an if statement fails, it'll just exit the program. So you don't technically have to use an else function, but in this case, because you have to use an end if for every if, it's just easier to use an else. And so this code says for each color in the range called color options right here, if the name of that color matches the name that was passed to this function, then empty out any value. Actually matches, it doesn't match. So if I'm looking at, let me explain this a little more simply. I have 5 items in my list. So first time through, if the first item on my list, I'm going to say C is that first item. If that name of C, the right 3 characters of that name, are not equal to the name that this function was given, then uncheck it. If it does match, hit it with a P, an end. The next one will now iterate, and so this time it says for the second color in my list, which is now C. C is now the second color. I've changed C's value from red to blue. Okay, and then I'm going to check to see if C's value is in fact, this actually will, when you get this C, it will actually be that entire name, that check opt underscore what have you. So that's why you're stripping off the last 3 characters here. You're saying if my second name in the list doesn't equal that, uncheck all of them. And so essentially, if you click on red, it's not going to affect that cell. It'll affect every cell whose name is not red. And therefore, if you have 100 colors in there and none of them are red, except for the one you clicked on, then all of those will get no value inside of them. But if you do, if they are red, so if you happen to sneak in 3 colors that are red, you can't with the named range, but if you would happen to be able to sneak that in, you wouldn't be able to do that because it would not assign it. But if you could, sorry, I misspoke. If you could, then it would put a capital P in every single one of those boxes. So the named range is cool that way. It will only allow unique values, so you could never have red twice. Okay, so that is almost complete. It basically takes that value and it'll put, okay, you're clicking on this value. I know the name of this value is red. Here that matches, so we'll put a P in there. Okay. So that's the first thing. Now, the other thing is, I should probably tell Excel to do something, to go, if I click in this cell and there's a value of capital P in it already, then I should uncheck it and send this cursor up here to A1 and then end. I don't need to do anything else because the code is already taken care of that if there's a checkbox in one cell, there won't be in any other cell in this list. So if that value exists, all I got to do is remove it. And then that's the end of the story. We're done. So that should be my first code. So if we go, if the cell is check opt, then I need to go to this function here is what it's saying. So then inside this logic, what I want to do is I want to use an if statement and say if we're going to go active, so we're going to go color because that's the active cell that we're in. Dot value equals P. Then we want to go active cell dot value equals nothing. Send the cursor to A1 by using range A1 dot select, and that's it, and we're done. But if anything else is true, and you know what, we're just gonna do an else if. Else if color dot value, oops, dot value is empty. And I want to make sure that I'm covering all my bases. If it's empty, it'll either be empty or it'll have a P in it. There is no second option. So it's important to remember that kind of stuff. Sometimes, oh, else if has to be one word in this case. That's the thing about computer programming languages. They all have their specific ways of doing things. Python is elif. You don't even have else in there. It's even shorter. Anyway, so now we can do our endif. And so this piece of code should basically say, hey, if there's already a value in the cell that I just clicked in, well, the first thing it says is, okay, does this cell start with check opt? If it does, if it has a value in it, I want to go ahead then and uh, I better, I'm going to make this active cell because just in case. Okay, if the value in the cell that I just clicked in has a value, then I'm just going to undo the value, select, and then we're on our way. Otherwise, it's going to assign it a value, or rather, otherwise, it's going to go to this piece of code and run this down here that we talked about first. So that should, hold on. I got an error. I didn't think it through. What happened? Oh, else if, okay, I should have done this too. Active cell. See, I knew I should have done that. All right. I'm going to get through this video. Coughing fits. Okay, what's happening? Hit stop. It's checking the value. Active self, it's P. It should change the value to nothing and select up there. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay. But oh, well, this is supposed to run. Let's see. So it still works if you do it that way. Oh, because I did not tell it active cell. Excuse me. Whoops. Oh, is it? Oh, what am I doing? Boy, I've forgotten how to do this. Dot select. Okay, so this is sending it back up. All right, so that should do it. That should work. There we go. So we're taking it. Okay, there's no P in there. Click it. Send it up. There is. Just undo. All right, what about, there you go. Now it's doing what you want it to do. So what we've done here is we've created mutually exclusive checkboxes that work like checkboxes. You can check it, you can uncheck it, and all of that work in this video is made longer because I've been talking, right? So I haven't been doing the work. It's much quicker. Now let's say you were using this one time. Wouldn't be worth all of that. And I know I talked about the cost value in the last video that I made. You want to think about it this way. If I'm going to be using this often, this is worthwhile to do. If I'm going to hand this out to a bunch of people, it becomes extremely worthwhile. And here's why. Not only will they be using it over and over and over again, but if I want to create a situation where I want you to know that I know that you know we know that you know. Just kidding. Friends reference if you don't know. If I want to show you that, hey, I've heard you and you know we're good to go. There's a lot of things that can happen. So this is going to say if, and it's pretty fun this way because you can go if equals and then like this, right? Then we can go red. And then we can do this really cool fun thing where we go comma. So this is the value of false. So basically right now, well, if right now, okay, right now that's just your simple formula. So I've clicked on this and now it's telling me your favorite color is red, right? Click on that, it's going to come out of there. So next thing I can do is the false value can be an if statement. So here we go. So going to hit Alt Enter. I'm gonna pull this down so that you can see what's going on. All right, so I've got I'm gonna put for every new if statement I need a it's weird how they do this, but I gotta put a parenthesis on the outside like that. Alt enter for a new line, which you don't have to do, but it makes it easier to keep track. So if this one is blue, in other words, if B has a P in it, right, then we go like this. And there you go. And now you've got a situation where you can tell the person, yeah, your color is blue, right? We could do Mad Libs on this to be fun. You could just select a bunch of stuff and make a crazy story. But this is something that I'm pointing out because of cost and so on. If I need that value, if something else in this spreadsheet is dependent upon this value for any reason, if I rely on a human being to type that value in somewhere, right here, for example, it's okay. If I rely on somebody to type it in, then typos can happen. And Excel isn't going to be like you or I and see the word like BLUXE or something and go, oh, he's trying to say blue. Because in context, if you and I saw something that said, your favorite color is Blux, we're probably thinking that person meant blue. It's pretty, for a human being, I would think that's pretty good. Out of context, that's pretty correct. But a computer's like, blue is not Blux. Those are not the same thing. I don't know what Blux is. Never heard of it. So, why would we do something like this? Some of this stuff has to do with just, okay, this is easy to do. Real easy to click on that and be on your way. But some of it is, I may want total control over what a person puts in this box solely based on something that they did over here or in this box or what have you. So the whole concept of doing something like this has less to do with ease and more to do with just accuracy. So we've got two things to be concerned with. If if I have to type in red or blue or green or purple or chartreuse 30, 40 times a day on a call for some weird reason, uh, then I have to type that in all those times. Okay. Now that can be repetitive stress injuries. It's not that big. That could take a long time over those particular words, but it's a factor. Let's take that out of it. It doesn't take long to type red one time. It does take long to type red 100 times, but it takes almost zero time to click a box 100 times. So your idea here is that if I'm doing this over and over and I have to do this over and over, not only is it going to be a lot of time that I'm saving, but 100 times of writing the word red is going to create a typo or two sometimes. So there's lots of reasons why you might spend all of the time to do this because programmatically speaking, if I give this to anybody, we're not going to have an issue, right? It's going to be red in this box every time any individual in any country, any time zone, any IQ level, that's what's going to happen. So it's a control thing, which will be good for some of the managers out there. Ha ha ha. But we would do this kind of stuff for various reasons. But one of the other things that I'd point out this is that formatting thing. And I think this is largely why I love this approach with formatting because at the end of the day, this could be extremely beautiful as an application. You can drag all these guys wherever you want them, like I was saying in my other video. And the beauty of it is, because ranges and stuff will update automatically, the things don't break. So now you're shifting stuff around, like, that's too many. I don't want that many. I want this to line up. You just have all these options that you just don't have if you're going to rely on your standard formatting when you first open your Excel. And you got to ask yourself, is this stuff worthwhile? Well, what do you want to do with your life, right? If you want to go out and be an Excel guru because it's fun, like for me, for example, I'm going to do this and I'm going to spend the time that I can to do this kind of thing because it's what I've shown is pretty basic, but it does require a little bit of VBA knowledge, you know. And so I, of course, have a degree in computer programming, so some of these concepts, like this looping thing right here, this is it's a way to completely avoid repeating itself, because this code could easily look like if this value has this value and it changed these four values, and then another line of code that says exactly the same thing, only with the conditional and the other unchecked values being different. So you'd have the same, you know, 15 lines of code over and over and over with slight variations, which would then get very tricky. And I can attest to this myself. It does get tricky to maintain and edit later on if you want to change something. And now, this is why I use this kind of coding as well. Because remember, we've got these named ranges in here, right? And you click on the button. I'm going to get rid of that right here. You click on the button, and then you end up with these check marks, right? But this guy has other colors he likes. So we're going to hit design mode. You have to do that, or it'll, if you hit design mode, it'll keep the macros from running automatically. So we do that, and now I want to add yellow, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to highlight this whole thing. I want to shift green down. Let's shift green down. So I'm going to highlight, insert, shift cells down, and now I can just type in yellow. Of course, now all of my other formatting is busted. All right, so back home, draw my border, just do it like this. Border, and then grab my pen, erase border, go bang, go boom, okay, escape, get back home. And so, since I have these named ranges in here, this one should still be color options. It is. So all I have to do is come in here and change this. Remember, it's 3 on the back side. So in that case, once we go back into design mode, it should just start working. And that's why we do this stuff that we do. Because then it becomes super easy to edit all this stuff. Imagine having to drag another option box down here, assign code to it individually, when all we had to do is insert a row, do the naming convention kind of stuff that we like to do. And now we've got, hey, chartreuse is kind of yellow, but it's kind of a pea yellow, so it's not really that great. But anyway, I know these videos are gonna be kind of long, because I do want to go into detail as to what my thought processes are, why I do these things, why you might want to do them. Besides just being fun, obviously. On my next video, um, this right here, same idea, but you would have to write a different code just for the 3 characters, which I had started when I started this video, but I wanted that specific thing to be about color. Um, and there would be other ways that we could go about, like if we did another one of these with a favorite, say, fruit or whatnot, then all you'd have to really do is you'd have to then collect the range like you do here, up here, before sending it to this function. And then instead of assigning the range manually here, you would also pass that range down there, put that value right there, and then it would work depending on your different needs. So your fruit value would work automatically with the same code and would not affect your color code. And so there's lots of ways to do it that way. You might have to tweak it a bit, but when you're thinking about using Excel, anything you can do to not repeat yourself in any aspects really, but with this Excel thing, it becomes super easy to code and maintain later. It becomes super easy to pass off to other people to use. And when you have to like roll out new updates, you're not spending massive amounts of time on the back end doing it. But I mean, we could go through lots of other things, but I'm going to end the video right about here. Just tell you what I'm going to do with this next one. I'm going to use a similar naming convention with this button. So I'm going to create the naming convention button, and then this will be calculate for later. But now I'm going to write code for that button, and anything with the BTN prefix will actually work like a button. And then I would use, maybe I'll go into showing how to gather the whole name on the back end of it, because that way you could really make this calculate button could stay calculate. You wouldn't have to limit it to 4 characters, and then you're not limited to what you can name your buttons and whatnot. But I'll show you how to make cells turn into buttons, and the whole purpose of this again is to avoid these tools up here. So until next time, I hope you got something out of this, even if it was just a chuckle. Like, subscribe, comment, etc. Have a good day.